Good evening and a warm welcome to all the viewers joining us for today's webinar. I am Avinash Singh, and on behalf of RPG Life Sciences, I welcome all for today's session on management of suspicious adnexal mass. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, a well-known and a respected oncologist from Bangalore, Dr. Shobha K. Welcome, Shobha ma'am, and thank you for joining us again. Pleasure having you
Thank you.
today with us. Dr.
Thank you.
Shobha is MS MCH Surgical Oncology, and since last 14 years, she has been associated as an associate professor in Department of Gynec Oncology in Kedwai Memorial Institute of Oncology in Bangalore. Currently, Shobha ma'am is honorary secretary for Karnataka State Chapter of Association of Gynecologic Oncologists of India. She has a passion and preventive oncology and community work, and she has been continuously associated towards creating awareness and prevention of breast cancer and cervical cancer. Shobha ma'am has been a speaker, panelist, and a chairperson in many CMEs and conferences as well, and she has numerous publications of scientific publications in various oncojournals. With such a vast experience in this field, it would be very interesting for us to understand on such a unique topic which she has chosen today. So without any further ado, I welcome all and I welcome Dr. Shobha ma'am and would request her to please carry forward the session. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krishna, for that kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. Hope this webinar will be an interesting one in your clinical practice. So mainly I've focused on how important it is to work up an suspicious adnexal mass. Since all of you know that commonly gynecologists come across these adnexal masses in reproductive age group and even in postmenopausal age group. And workup of this evaluation and which to actively intervene, which you can keep under conservative management, I think should be clear cut. So hopefully in this talk, I think we can have a overall view on how to manage an adnexal mass. Thank you all of you for joining in. So I think without wasting the time, I'll just start my talk. So moving on with the management of suspicious adnexal mass. So my talk today will be covering under these headings. So just a small introduction and how patient will present and what are the differential diagnoses you have to keep in mind. How will you further work those patients and what are the guidelines now for your management. So adnexal, adnexa, all of you know, it is the area which is adjacent to the uterus, which is the ligaments, vessels, tubes, and ovaries. So commonly when we say adnexal mass, it is mostly arising from an ovarian, from the ovaries. So ovarian mass is the commonest adnexal mass which we come across in a woman. So apart from that, we have other differential diagnosis also. But I think today we will keep our discussion mainly for the discussion, management of ovarian masses, suspicious ovarian masses. So what is the cry and hue about this adnexal masses presentation? So it always gives a kind of diagnostic dilemma. So the differential diagnosis is extensive and most of the masses being benign. So it is quite alarming when it is detected either incidentally or when a patient has some symptoms and you'll have to decide whether you have to take immediate intervention or not. So you will have to, it is kind of a dilemma. So, and of course, without any histopathologic tissue diagnosis, you will have to manage the ovarian masses. That is the most thing because cytology in an ovarian mass is contraindicated in any ways, except until you're thinking it is an advanced ovarian malignancy and you're giving other treatment. But just an ovarian mass cytology, FNAC is definitely contraindicated. So you're dealing with the case where you have to presume and come to a conclusion whether it is a benign or suspicious or a malignant mass. So for that, you need a complete detailed history examination and your other clinical, radiological and biochemical tests. So which I'll tell further. So as I told, whenever an excel mass, an ovarian mass is detected in women, so the likelihood of malignancy, it is in a premenopausal lady, it is quite low because most of them are benign pathology. But up to 10%, it could be borderline or malignant. So, but as the age advances, if she's a postmenopausal age group lady, then definitely the risk of malignancy will be higher. So up to 30% of risk of malignancy will be there in a postmenopausal lady detected with an ovarian mass. So as you see here, there's one in 1,000 women affected in reproductive age group, but that increases to 3 in 1,000 at the age of 50 years. And as the age advances, also the risk also it increases. So age is an important factor to be kept in mind. So what is the rationale behind all this evaluation? So we are thinking whether conservative management is possible, and we have to give conservative management wherever possible because most of the cysts in reproductive age group could be a functional cyst, a benign cyst. So which are the cases we can give conservative management because morbidity will be low in these if you don't intervene unnecessarily. Then what is the role of laparoscopy? If is laparoscopy appropriate? So that we have to evaluate. And then when is the referral to the gynae oncologist is important. So these are the rationale behind our workup. Okay, so once we work up all this, you'll have a clear-cut idea what you have to do with this ovarian masses. So with this good evaluation, you are definitely going to reduce the morbidity and mortality associated if it's in malignancy associated with malignancy, or if it is borderline benign, definitely without unnecessary intervention, her morbidity will be low. With the conservative management, quality of life will be good. So all this thing keeping in mind, we'll go further. So it's a adnexal mass, it's a common problem affecting females of all ages. So diagnosis and management is always a dilemma, and accuracy of current technological investigations are very limited. So that is the problem here. So unlike an endometrial pathology where you can do a DNC and come to a clear-cut conclusion and then go ahead with the management protocol, here it is not clear-cut. So first thing, whenever an adnexal mass is detected, you have to see where the origin is from, whether it is a gynec pathology or a non-gynec pathology, whether it's a benign one or a malignant one, and accordingly manage appropriately. And also you have to balance the risks of, as I said, conservative management or surgical management, and the use of laparoscopy, when to do, when not to do, and referral of gynae oncologists. So what are the differential diagnoses in a suspicious mass? So it could be an ovarian mass, it could be a tubal mass, extra ovarian or extra tubal, or uterine mass, and other non-gynec origins. So how do you evaluate? So ovarian mass is detected, either a female comes with symptoms, or it could be an incidental finding. She comes with some other problem and her ultrasound is done and coincidentally it is detected. Or if she is a high risk lady, I mean, if she's having a family history of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, then definitely she'll be under the screening protocol. So in that screening protocol, it is detected. So these are the three modalities where you can have an ovarian mass. So what do you do with this? So as I said, these are the differential diagnoses we have to keep whenever you come across an adnexal masses. So benign pathology in a reproductive age group, very common, 90% of them. So it could be functional cyst, very common, endometriomas in young ladies, serous cystadenomas, mucinous cystadenomas, and mature teratomas, which are the benign neoplasms. And the non-ovarian pathology, we can come across paratubal cysts, para-ovarian cysts, little rare, but you can come across. Then hydrosalpinx, tubo-ovarian masses, could be hydrosalpinx or abscess, tubo-ovarian abscess. And of course, peritoneal pseudocysts can be there. Broad ligament fibroid can present as an adnexal mass, and very rarely pelvic kidney and diverticular abscess, etc. So apart from the benign pathology, the malignant one most common is the germ cell tumor in younger reproductive age group. Germ cell tumor is the first thing which you have to keep in mind. If she's a postmenopausal lady, there are high chances of epithelial ovarian cancer. And sex cord stromal tumor can occur in both reproductive and postmenopausal ladies. So what about the adnexal mass seen in prepubertal age group? Yeah, I'll come across. Then another one you have to keep in mind is the secondary malignant ovarian mass, metastatic ovaries. The primary could be from either colon, GI tumors, or from breast. So that also should be kept in mind. So as I said, when you see an adnexal mass in pre-puberty, before menarche, if when a small girl comes along with a pelvic or an ovarian mass, definitely the malignancy chances are high in this girl. That is 90% of chance of malignancy will be there, and most commonly it is germ cell tumor, and some rarely can have granulosa cell tumor also. And in reproductive age group, 8 to 12% of them can be malignant, and commonest is the germ cell tumor, and even epithelial ovarian cancers can be seen. And mind you, even metastatic ovarian masses are common in younger age group, that is around 35 to 40 years. They can present as bilateral ovarian masses, solid masses, either coming from colon or from stomach or from breast. So in reproductive age group, metastatic ovarian cancer also is quite common. 10% of them can present. In postmenopausal age group, any adnexal pathology, incidence of malignancy, risk of malignancy is up to 30 to 40% they can have. So always any adnexal mass should be dealt immediately in postmenopausal ladies. So how do you approach this? So initial approach is to determine one who requires the immediate surgical intervention, and you have to do further, what are the further testing to be done, and then give them appropriate management. So what is the role of history? As you all know, history is a very important part of our workup. So our whatever presumed diagnosis starts with a detailed history, which is very important even in this. So medical history, any risk factors, the associated ovarian cancer, protective factors. So risk factor, I will elaborate on the risk and protective factors, and know about the family history, any history, first degree relatives having a breast cancer or ovarian cancer, or the patient itself is an old ovarian cancer or breast cancer treated and on follow-up. So that should be taken into account. If she is a nulliparous lady, the risk of having a malignancy is high, because the clear cell carcinomas are quite common. Mucinous carcinomas are one kind of tumor which arises from endometriosis. So infertility history and endometriosis, treated for endometriosis, is important while taking history. So yeah, and BRCA, if status is known, if she is having positive BRCA, then risk of having malignancy is high. Lynch syndrome, if she's having, that also increases the risk. So all these are the risk factors, as I said, infertility, endometriosis, etc. So coming to the symptoms per se, if the patient has come with any symptoms. So if she is a prepubertal girl, I mean, she can come with history of pain abdomen. She can come with symptoms of precocious puberty, like abnormal vaginal bleeding. Then she can have increased breast size, inappropriate for her age. So accordingly, if it's a hormone secreting tumor, she'll have those kind of symptoms. If she's a reproductive age group, and if she's having infertility history, then accordingly the history will be, she's having an endometriosis, dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, tenesmus, and infertility. So these history will point towards endometrioma mostly. So that in a reproductive age group, that you should keep in mind. If she comes with a history of any acute abdomen, So nausea, vomiting, syncopal attack, abdominal distension. So it could be a torsion ovarian cyst, or it could be an ectopic ruptured ectopic. So that history should be taken. And if it is a malignant ovarian cancer, then definitely as the patient enters, you will know she's cachexic. I mean, her performance status is not good. She might have breathlessness. She might have abdominal distension due to ascites, due to a huge ovarian mass, or due to pleural effusion, she'll be dyspneic, tachypneic. So all this might point towards a malignant pathology. And of course, if it's a sex cord stromal tumors, then it is a hormone secreting tumor. So they will have it gives history of menstrual irregularity. So if it is a reproductive age group, she might have menorrhagia, or she might have polymenorrhea, and virilizing and androgenic features depending on what kind of hormone secreting tumors they have. And if she is a postmenopausal lady, she'll have history of postmenopausal bleeding. So with all this history, accordingly, you have to go and work up, evaluate her. So, and on exam, as I said, so patient can come with no symptoms, one, or she can come with mass, which you can palpate on examination. She can complain urinary or bowel abnormality she can have. Then change in weight. So loss of appetite, loss of weight is a main complaint, main symptoms pointing towards malignancy. Then if she can come with an image report telling, which depicts ovarian mass, or sometimes abnormal vaginal bleeding. So all this, after this, you have to do a complete detailed physical examinations. So here you will see the mass, whether it is felt per abdomen or it is a pelvic mass. Okay, so where can you make out the origin of the mass, whether it's a uterine mass, or whether it's an ovarian mass or an adnexal mass? You will know. I don't have to tell you in detail, but the size of the mass, the consistency of the mass, mobility of the mass should be noted. So features which is concerning for malignancy is it could be a solid firm mass which is adherent, fixed, irregular nodular mass, and even the posterior cul-de-sac will have nodularity. So that indicates it could be a malignant one. So other adnexal pathology, if it is an endometrioma or a tubo-ovarian mass, it will be a tender, boggy feel. And especially endometriomas, you have a soft, boggy feel. Mass, adnexal mass will be there. So tubo-ovarian mass, tender mass. So, and rectovaginal examination is a must for all pelvic masses to know whether it is arising from an rectum. Sometimes rectal mass can be infiltrating into the pouch of Douglas and infiltrating the vagina. So you'll have to know whether it is arising from rectal. So primary is from rectum, or from the adnexa will be delineated, and also whether infiltration into the rectum, the ovarian mass can infiltrate into the rectum. So that also can be it can be felt by while doing a per vagino-rectal examination. So as I said, the signs, these are the signs which can indicate whether it is an endometrioma, whether it is an epithelial ovarian cancer, or a torsion, rupture. In torsion and rupture, you'll have an acute abdomen, tenderness is there, guarding rigidity can be present. So all this with the detailed history and examination of the patient, you can come to a conclusion that this could be a probable diagnosis. But if not done properly, the sensitivity can be low. So there is a variation in the sensitivity. So studies have shown that sensitivity can be varied between 15 to 50% with our history and clinical examination. So our level of suspicion determines what diagnostic tests should be conducted. So what we have to do apart from our all this examination? The next thing what we have to do is the first is a imaging study. Imaging can be an ultrasound, pelvic, transvaginal or transabdominal, and it further you can go for MRI in certain cases. CT scan in indicated in some, And then PET-CT, I'll tell you, there's no actual role of PET-CT in ovarian masses and Excel mass. So important one is your ultrasound findings. So what does ultrasound tells? So first thing, imaging, it will tell us where the origin of the mass is from. So whether it is an arising from ovary, arising from tubes, or arising from the uterus, or extra ovarian pathology, means arising from the colon. So or arising from the appendix. So all this, it can be delineated in by a good sonologist. Okay. So experienced sonologists can give us each and every detail what a CT scan also can give almost. So a simple cyst, it is unlikely to be malignant. So probably it is a follicular cyst. So which usually it is between 2.5 to 5 centimeter, simple cyst. And it will have an, if it's having an homogeneous appearance, it will suggest it could be an endometrioma. So what are the features which will suggest it is malignancy is the solid component in the cystic mass or a complete solid mass itself. So thick septations, the septations, if it is thick, or if there's presence of ascites are there or any other peritoneal deposits are there, that all this will indicate malignancy. So there are clear-cut guidelines. So this is a picture showing a simple ovarian cyst, completely cystic. This is in transvaginal ultrasound. And this is a, see, a multi-septated clear cyst, so which is a very, very depictive of mucinous tumor. So in imaging studies, they have certain rules for predicting benign tumor and malignant tumor, which is like B rules and M rules. And according to that, they give scoring and they score. And depending on whether it's unilocular, whether there's a presence of solid component and the size of the component. So less than 7 millimeter could be a benign solid component like in adenomas. So that also is important. And presence of acoustic shadows, presence of multilocular tumor, and the blood flow. So all this they take into account. And for rules for predicting malignant tumor, as I said, irregular solid tumor, presence of ascites, and papillary excrescences. That is one of the important structure which indicates borderline or malignant pathology. And irregular multilocular thick septations will be there, which is more than 10 centimeter masses. And blood flow will be increased in these masses. So these are the one which predicts malignancy. So this, as I said, B rules and M rules, I think in benign, it is a unilocular cyst. The solid component is very small, less than 7 millimeter, but the blood flow is not, there's no blood flow into this, remember that. Then there will be presence of acoustic shadowing in benign pathology. And it is usually the cyst will be less than 10 centimeter. Whereas in malignant, we have an irregular solid area where the blood flow is very strong there. Whereas there will be papillary projections will be there, multiple projections, then multiloculated with thick septations more than 4 millimeter. These all indicate malignancy. And present, of course, in advanced cases, there will be presence of ascites, presence of peritoneal nodules, and upper abdominal metastasis. So this is a chart which shows that how do you differentiate different pathology with ultrasound, dermoid cyst, endometrioma, hemorrhagic corpus luteal. So if your radiologist is well experienced and good, what the mind knows, the eye sees, it's like that. So definitely he or she can give a good predictive of malignancy or benign. So there's no single ultrasound findings which can clearly say, yes, this is malignant. So if there is a small solid area, you cannot just put it like it is a malignant pathology. So you'll have to take other things also into consideration. So to improve the sensitivity and specificity of only ultrasound findings, we can add the Doppler study. So Doppler study, color flow mapping, all this will increase the sensitivity and specificity. So of course, and then they can categorize, and we can accordingly we can manage the patient. So this, as I said, Doppler pulmonary pulsatility index should be less than 1, and the resistance index should be less than 0.4. Then it is indicative of malignancy. So, so with ultrasound and Doppler, you can improve the sensitivity and specificity for malignancy. So see, the dermoid is one of the commonest ovarian mass which all of us come across. So it has got, what is the problem in this? Sometimes it can show as a one solid area will be there. So if this is seen, then it is very confusing, and we are in a dilemma whether to do a laparoscopy or laparotomy, or send refer to an oncologist, or managed by a gynecologist. So all this will be there. But as I said, a good imaging can definitely 95% of them can be diagnosed. Dermoid can be diagnosed preoperatively. So it is mainly cystic with hyper and hypoechoic areas, and you have the fatty elements, calcification, etc. So the main pathognomic present feature is the Rokitansky's nodule. So it is a nodule which is formed along with the teeth, hair, etc. So, and this fat fluid level also is there. So with these findings, it is highly predictive of dermoid. So in epithelial tumors, we have, if it is malignancy, as I said, we'll have a thick wall, septations, irregular enhanced areas. Then we'll have mural nodularity will be there, along with necrosis, papillary projections. Endometriomas, slightly hyperechoic foci, though it is a unilocular cyst. So hyperechoic foci will be there, but usually no septa or solid areas will be there. But chronic endometriomas can present as a small solid area. So then it becomes little confusing. So whether it is a malignant one or a benign one, then these are the conditions where we can go ahead with an advanced imaging like MRI. So where it can clearly delineate whether it is a solid area, it's a component of malignancy, or whether it's a component of a benign pathology. So then, yeah, of course, CT scan for dermoid, we don't need to do a CT scan. I think ultrasound is good enough. So as I said, for endometriomas, if there is any inconclusive, then but history examination is pointing towards a benign pathology, then you can go ahead with MRI. So there on fat suppression, definitely you can make out it is an endometrium cyst. So this is this one showing adenoma. As I said, benign adenoma. This is showing a solid, slightly thick septations are there, but there are no solid areas. So it is a benign pathology. So these are completely cystic areas. The left side, what you're seeing, both with the thin septations. So there's no solid area. So these are the images for a cystic. And this one, honeycomb appearance, typical honeycomb appearance in a mucinous, multiloculated tumors. So mucinous tumors appear like this, multiple loculated cystic areas. So this is a image showing a solid area with papillary projection. See, you can see this inside here, which is projecting inside. So papillary projection is one which we should not overlook. So if it is single projection, we'll see the how thick is the projection and irregularity or regular. So that should be taken into account. So what is the role of CT scan? As such, a CT scan in a reproductive age group, it is not the primary modality of imaging. So a good transvaginal or a good transabdominal scan with Doppler definitely gives a good predictive of benign or malignancy. But if it is a more suspicious of malignancy, CT scan is done as a staging for staging purpose in an ovarian cancer. For benign pathology, CT scan is not an indication, not advised. So it is mainly important to know the peritoneal deposits, to know as the presence of any splenic mets or lymph nodal status. All this will be known by them. So, but there is, even in ovarian cancer, there's limitation small peritoneal nodules, not a preoperative evaluation for a reproductive age group, which is suggestive of a benign one. So only when your malignancy is there, you're suspicious of malignancy, then you go ahead for staging purpose. So this is a image showing solid areas. And what is the role of MRI in these adnexal pathology? So as I said, whenever you have inconclusive reporting in by a good sonologist, then you can go ahead with the MRI to delineate the mass, whether it is an ovarian mass or a tubal mass will be clearly delineated. And even in ovarian, if it's an ovarian mass, whether the solid area, whether it is a fat or whether it is blood, will be clearly made out in magnetic resonance MRI. So also in pregnant ladies, you can go for an upfront MRI. Okay, that's so ionizing radiation is not there. So MRI will in younger, very young age females and in pregnant ladies, it can be done. But only thing is, it is not very easily available everywhere like CT scan, and also it is quite expensive compared to CT scan. So that is one thing. And then who are allergic to the contrasting agent in CT scan, they can go in for MRI. So this is mainly indicated in a mass which is inconclusive, indeterminate mass with the other imaging modalities. Okay, so this is about the imaging. So with the imaging and clinical examination, now you have one clear cut, 70 to 80% of it can be this or that. You have an idea. But along with that, to improve more of this, what else can you do? So there are certain biochemical markers, so which will indicate certain malignancies. So one of them is CA125. Then other tumor markers in reproductive age group, what you can do for germ cell tumors are beta HCG, LDH, alpha fetoprotein. Then in granulosa cell tumor, you have inhibin, serum inhibin levels. So these are in younger age group, less than 40 years. Whenever they come with adnexal mass, these are the tumor markers which has to be done. What about CA 19.9? So this is elevated in mucinous tumor. So mucinous tumor, definitely, if it is a malignancy, it will be highly raised. And if it other GI malignancy also, this can be raised, CA 19.9, pancreatic and and then HT4, it is a new marker. I will talk in detail about that. So that is one more serum marker which we can do. As all of you know, CA125 is not specific. So it is unreliable, not specific, and only it is elevated in 50% of early ovarian cancer and 75 to 80% of advanced ovarian cancer. So still, even in advanced, 25% of them can have normal ovarian, normal CA125 levels. And of course, 50% of the early ovarian cancer, CA125 can be normal. And also it is elevated in the non-malignant conditions, benign pathology. So HT4 is supposed to be more specific, and it is also more diagnostic in nature. So as I said, in less than 40 years, other tumor markers, AFP, beta HCG, LDH should be done. And in granulosa tumors, you can do an inhibin and anti-Mullerian factor also. So these are the other conditions where you can have elevated CA125. So it is very confusing with elevated CA125. So, but if it is highly elevated ovarian carcinoma, 80% of them, they will be elevated CA125. And colorectal cancer also, it can be increased hepatocellular carcinoma, pancreatic carcinoma, breast carcinoma, lung carcinoma, it can be increased. So all the other cancers, apart from ovarian cancer, it can show an elevated levels. Apart from that, benign condition like endometriosis, tuberculosis, pelvic infection, it can be elevated. So cirrhosis of liver, that also it can show. Even in normal pregnancy, menstruation, slightly elevation of CA125 is there. So you can't take only one level of CA125 and act accordingly. So we'll have to go through series of, if it is elevated slightly, you have to go through series of CA125 if you're keeping the patient under conservative management. So what is this HE4? HE4 is human epididymis protein 4. It's a glycoprotein in the epithelial cells of the epididymis. So it is highly increased, it is highly specific in ovarian cancer. Also, it is increased in endometrial cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic, breast and transition cell cancers, but highly specific when a patient presenting with ovarian mass HE4 is positive, then definitely the risk of malignancy is very high. So I won't go in detail, but as I said, the sensitivity is higher than, as you see here, sensitivity of CA125 is 78%, whereas HE4, the sensitivity is 93%. So 93% HE4 sensitivity, and it is expressed in 32% of the CA125 deficient ovarian cancer. So if CA125 is normal, patient is having an abnormal suspicious ovarian mass, then you can do an HE4. There you can see an elevated HE4 too. So 32% of them can have a normal CA125 but HE4 raised. So then you can plan your management accordingly. So now what we say is combination of HE4 and CA125 levels, both taken together, can increase the sensitivity and specificity. So what are the other, how can you estimate the malignancy in ovarian mass? We have other, as I said, morphological assessment. We know the type of masses, how will, what are the features you have to take. The other one what we have is the RMI score. So RMI score, we have ROMA, we have OVA 1 and 2, which we will go in detail. So this RMI, risk of malignancy index, is one which is recommended by RCOG, ASCO and all. Here they take into account CA125, menopausal status and ultrasound score, and accordingly give point for the ultrasound findings, and then multiply with the menopausal status, premenopausal 1, postmenopausal 3, and multiply that with CA125 levels. So the cutoff value of 200, they say sensitivity of picking up malignancy in that ovarian mass is 85% and specificity 75%. But as an experienced this one, person, the clinician, I have seen that in a reproductive age group, when the CA125 is high, especially in endometriosis, CA125 level is high, definitely this RMI scoring is not highly predictive of malignancy. So yes, in postmenopausal ladies, it is quite predictive, but in reproductive age group, you have to be cautious also and take into other elements into consideration before terming it as malignancy. Okay, then there are some modifications of RMI 1, 2, 3, 4, but only 1 and 2 is validated, and the NICE guidelines say that RMI score is done in suspected cases and managed accordingly. What is this? ROMA is this risk of ovarian malignancy algorithm. Here, this is based on CA, as I said, combination of CA125, HE4 for that age. So these three are taken into consideration. So FDA has recommended that ROMA must always be interpreted against the clinical and radiological findings. So you have a ovarian mass and the clinical suspicion is there, then definitely you have to go for this ROMA evaluation. And any value more than 1.4, there is high risk of malignancy. This positive predictive value is about 95%. So definitely this is a good estimation of malignancy. So this is the calculation what will be done. Then other one is the OVA test, OVA 1 test. Here, a combination of 5 tumor markers are taken. That is CA125 transferrin, prealbumin, apolipoprotein, and beta-2 microglobuli. Your computer program takes each variable, and according to the patient's age, it will create an ovarian risk malignancy risk score. So in premenopausal, if it is more than 5, it is high risk for malignancy. If in postmenopausal, more than 4.4, it is high risk for malignancy. So this is also one of a good predictive for malignancy. So when you can do OVA test. So FDA has approved the test in the following criteria. Whenever a female is over 18 years of age and she is having an adnexal ovarian mass where you are planning a surgery, but and you want to see whether you have to refer her to a gynae oncologist, or you only can manage. And then if she has not had a history of in the past 5 years, she should not have any history of any cancer. So in these kind of females, you can do a OVA test. So that will predict whether you can manage, gynecologist can manage that mass, or you'll have to need to refer. So now coming to management. So with all this evaluation, you can definitely come to a conclusion whether you want to refer the patient, or you want to deal with the patient as a benign case. Okay, what do the ACOG and SGO guidelines says? When do you have to refer the patient? Whenever it is suspicious of malignancy. In postmenopausal female, suspicious malignancy pelvic mass is suggested at least by one of the following. So whenever they have an elevated CA125 more than 65, whenever there's presence of ascites, if it's a nodular or fixed pelvic mass, or if there is any evidence of distendments, definitely those patients should be referred to a gynae oncologist. In premenopausal female, if the pelvic mass is suspicious in the presence of the following: if the CA125 levels are more than 200 units per ml, or if she's having ascites or evidence of METS is there. So, but the positive predictive value according to these studies is just 40%, because as I said, endometriosis is one of the commonest ovarian mass we come across in a younger age group, and benign pathology also, where in endometriosis, increased CA125 is quite high levels. So other risk factors also should be considered. So if she's having a family history of 2 or more first degree relatives, and if she is elderly, postmenopause, advancing age, that also should be considered. Nulliparity, if she has attained early menarche or late menopause, late childbirth, if she's having chronic history of chronic smoking, all these are risk factors which shows that she is at high risk for malignancy in that ovarian mass. So the protective factors, as I said, if she has used OC pills for a minimum of 2 years, there is some protection. 5 years, good protection. Pregnancy, breastfeeding, tubal ligation, or if she's post-hysterectomized patient, definitely the risk will be less. So that is a protection factor. So if with all this history and examination and diagnostic things, how do you manage once? So a complex, so as all of you know, an ovarian cyst in reproductive age group, most of them are functional benign. If it's a functional cyst, it will regress within 2 to 3 cycles, within 2 to 3 monthly cycles, if it is not regressing. So if the size is persistently growing, or if it is static, it's not regressing. So more than 7 centimeter clear cyst also you will have to manage in a premenopausal reproductive age group. Or if patient is having symptoms, definitely you will have to manage accordingly. In postmenopausal lady, even though the size does not matter, because any bulky ovaries in a postmenopausal lady, the risk of malignancy is little high in them. Even if it's simple cyst, 10% of them can have chances of having malignancy. In a simple cyst I'm talking about. If it's a complex cyst, definitely chances is up to 30 to 40%. So accordingly, as I said, you manage. So this is a schematic presentation of what you do. Complex mass in postmenopausal female, if she is asymptomatic and normal CA125 levels. Here, simple cyst less than 10 centimeter, you can repeat imaging in 6 months. And if it is reducing in size, then you follow every 6 months. If it is a complex small mass, less than 5 centimeter, then you have to repeat the scan after 4 or 6 weeks. And then if it is persisting, you'll have to intervene with surgery. Then, or with other diagnostic procedure, and then continue with surgery. Then if patient is symptomatic or elevated CA125, you have to assess the risk of malignancy, and accordingly, if it is low risk, you can go ahead with the surgery. If it is a high risk, you'll have to refer to a gynae oncologist for further management. So in premenopausal women, as I said, asymptomatic, up to 10 centimeters, you can watch for a couple of months. So because here risk of malignancy is very, very less than 0.5 centimeter. So you'll have to repeat scan after 2 months. Sorry, yeah. And then if the size is more than 10 centimeter or it persists, then you'll have to think of intervening surgically. So if the patient is symptomatic, definitely you assess the risk of malignancy. Low risk, do surgery. High risk, refer for gynae-oncologist. So that is the guidelines recommendation by ACOG, by European Society, and the clinical practice guidelines. So all these tell that that's how you will have to manage with the head neck cell mass. So when do you do surgery? So patient asymptomatic, well characterized cystic mass, so you can keep her on conservative management. So do a regular pelvic examination, repeat imaging after 6 to 8 weeks. And in a postmenopausal lady, as I said, if it's more than 5 centimeter, you have to intervene. Less than 5 centimeter, you can repeat after 4 weeks and then take a call. So when you do a surgical approach, so whenever the growth, if there is a solid area in the mass, immediately you'll have to intervene. If patient becomes symptomatic, you'll have to intervene with surgery or other findings in the imaging, additional findings, then you'll have to think of surgery. So suspicion of malignancy is increased in, as I said, pre-pubertal age group and in postmenopausal women. So if in reproductive age group, I said cyst is there, cyst aspiration, never do a cyst aspiration because the chances of recurrence, recurring again and again is high. And especially in postmenopausal female, it has to be avoided. So the role of surgery, as I said, whenever patient becomes symptomatic and complex mass, regardless of size, go ahead with surgery. Premenopausal persisting mass of more than 7 centimeter, means persisting for more than 3 months, then 3 to 4 months, then you'll have to think of surgery. Postmenopausal cyst more than 5 centimeter, you can straight away take up a surgery or observe for a month or 4 to 6 weeks and then take a call. And whenever they're suspicious of malignancy, definitely there's surgery is a call. So important thing is if it is a malignant thing, it will be an early ovarian malignancy, right? So how to manage? Just I have put one couple of slides to tell. So frozen section is a must whenever you're managing a suspicious ovarian mass. Without arranging for a frozen section, don't go ahead with the surgery. So an oncologist, gynae-oncologist with the facility of frozen section is mandatory for doing a management surgery of an ovarian cancer. So the staging laparotomy is indicated. Laparoscopic staging, is there a role? Fertility preservation, yes, there is. Then role of restaging means if you have done an ovarian cystectomy, then it turn out to be malignancy, then again she has to go for a restaging. So as in frozen section, definitely malignancy and benign diagnosis can be made by a good pathologist in 95%. The accuracy is 95 to 96%. In borderline ovarian tumor, if it is a borderline ovarian tumor and especially mucinous tumor, even it can get the final histopathology, 20 to 30% of them can get upgraded to invasive cancer. So a thorough exploration decision on staging based on findings and level of suspicion and patient preferences, all this should be kept in mind while managing these suspicious ovarian masses. So always in discrepancy rates in mucinous tumors is quite high, so 30 to 40% of them. So this is with final HPR, as I said, in borderline and borderline tumors, it can upgraded, especially in mucinous tumors. So surgical staging, restaging. So apparently 25 to 30% of them, you might think it is stage 1 confined to ovaries, but that 25% to 30% of them can get upgraded when you do a complete staging. So complete staging, which will include a omentectomy, pelvic and para-aortic lymph node dissection. So their upgradation of this stage will happen. So what about the role of laparoscopy? So laparoscopy surgery can be done in benign cysts, clear benign cysts, which I think there is always an argument between the sizes, but I think most of the guidelines say 10 centimeter is the upper limit. So beyond 10 centimeter, because you can miss out a solid area. So beyond 10 centimeter, laparoscopic surgery is not a standard of surgery. So, and also any cyst which is suspicious, do not go for laparoscopy surgery. So even in ovarian cancer, staging with laparoscopy, it is not the standard procedure right now. Only in interval, means post chemotherapy, post neoadjuvant chemotherapy, interval surgery when we can do laparoscopy. But otherwise, for an upfront primary staging, laparoscopy is not a gold standard. So avoid doing a laparoscopic surgery because cyst rupture is quite common, and then you can upgrade the upstage the tumor. And so spillage definitely is there. The chance of spillage is more, and not indicated in suspicious or a bigger mass. So to conclude, head neck cell mass in premenopausal and postmenopausal women they're dealt differently. So you should have index of suspicion, patient risk factors with your clinical examination, with your other biochemical imaging tests. So all this will determine the order of managing the patient. So referral of gynae oncologist is a must for better patient survival. So to conclude, if we do not give any benefit, at least we should not do any harm to the patient. That should be the main intention when we treat our patients. So basic principles of surgery and oncology should be maintained, and better to provide a good quality of life to patients, even if it is with obvious scar on the abdomen. So all ovarian masses should be appropriately managed after complete workup. So HE4 as in Roma, it can be used for diagnostic workup. I think more and more HE4, if it is done in a complex ovarian mass, along with the good imaging, definitely more diagnostic sensitivity and specificity will be high with HE4. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot for this wonderful session. And I think you have explained almost all the parts which is required for the management. And the doctors who have joined us, I think it would be beneficial for them. So thank you, ma'am, once again.
Thank you.
I request all the doctors who have joined us, they can now ask question to ma'am. They can type in the Q&A box below, and ma'am would be happy to answer it. Ma'am, we have few questions.
Yeah.
Dr. Sudha, she is asking, what is IOTA? Can you abbreviate?
Yeah, international group of radiation oncologists. They have formed an international group.
Someone has written the answer in ovarian tumor analysis.
International Ovarian Analysis Group.
Yeah, and she's asking again, is it a must to do para-aortic lymph node dissection in borderline tumors and in malignant tumors? Where there is
in borderline tumors,
lymph node involved.
Yeah, in borderline tumors, the minimum staging what you have to do is an unilateral salpingo-ovariotomy. Along with that, intracolonic omentectomy, and then unilateral pelvic lymph node dissection is what is needed. Para-aortic is not needed here, borderline tumors. So you don't have to do para-aortic for borderline tumors.
Dr. Lakshmi ma'am, she is congratulating you. It was a very elaborate session. So
thank you.
Dr. Ramesh Raheja, he is asking, any blood test to confirm the diagnosis?
That's what I said is HE4-1, that is a serum test only. So that is more diagnostic compared to CA125, which is very non-specific. HE4 is more specific. But 100% there's no test to say that is this is this cancer, except for the germ cell tumors where you have specific tumor markers. So their serum AFP levels, alpha fetoprotein levels will indicate definitely it is a yolk sac tumor. So LDH will indicate this is a teratoma, immature teratoma, dysgeminoma. So germ cell tumors, specific tumor markers are there, but for epithelial ovarian cancers, there is no specific tumors. But HE4 is a new protein biomarker where it is diagnostic. So in a complex ovarian mass where you're highly suspicious of malignancy, HE4 it will tell you if it is raised. Definitely, you will have to take an oncologist help, or you can refer them to an onco center for complete staging and management. If it is normal, it could be an endometrioma, or it could be a chronic hemorrhagic cyst, which shows a solid area, like which sometimes present as a suspicious mass. So HE4 is one new marker.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Veda Nayak, he's asking, what is the management option in post-hysterectomy patient, especially when the mass is small?
Yeah, as I said, if she's a reproductive age group, I mean, once the surgical menopause is there, you'll have to just depend on the type of the imaging findings. So if it's in a clear cyst, if she's 45 years, clear cyst, there's no other suspicious element in the imaging, then you can take it as a benign pathology and you can follow up according to the protocol. But if she is above 50 years, chances of malignancy will be slightly high. Even if it is a small ovarian mass, like bulky mass, volume also they take into account. So that could be suspicious of malignancy. You will have to intervene. So even if it is, size is not this one criteria to keep them under observation in females above 50 years. So definitely any female with an abnormal adnexal mass, you'll have to intervene with active intervention.
Dr. Lakshmi, she is asking, do you really advise USG monitoring for ovarian cancer in family along with CA125?
Yeah. So as you all know that ovarian cancer screening is not a standard for general population, but in high risk group, especially when they have first degree relatives who are having a history of either ovarian or breast cancer or Lynch syndrome, or if BRCA status is known and it is positive, and definitely we'll have to do an ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound, and serial CA125 levels. So it is advised. So we have this ROCA, that is risk of ovarian cancer. So in that is in screening. For it should be done. So transvaginal ultrasound with serial levels of CA125.
Dr. Geeta ma'am, she's asking, what is the role of post-operative chemotherapy in borderline ovarian tumor? And also she's congratulating you for the session, wonderful session.
Thank you. There's no role of chemotherapy in borderline tumors. So borderline tumors, there's no invasion of stroma there. So definitely whatever staging we have done, minimum staging is enough. And there's no pathology should be very sure that there's no invasive components. Means invasion of stroma should be absent. Then only they can put it into borderline category. So these borderline tumors, they do not need chemotherapy, adjuvant chemotherapy.
Pavs, I think the name is Pavs. He's asking brief on OVA1 as a screening marker in ovarian tumor.
Yeah, it is FDA has recommended, approved for examination above 18-year-old females with an ovarian mass, suspicion ovarian mass. You can use OVA test where it includes 5, which I elaborated in my PPT. So those markers will be taken into account, and accordingly they will be given a score. So higher the score, more chances of going in for malignancy, that mass. So lower the score, if you're thinking of keeping for conservative, then definitely you can keep for conservative. So that has a role. Yeah, OVA test.
Thanks, ma'am. Dr. Ravi Kumar, he's asking, what is the role of relook laparotomy in ovarian tumor?
Relook laparotomy means after primary staging or after giving the complete treatment.
Ma'am, here he has not mentioned anything.
Okay, if he is meaning that after, usually before there was an old concept of after treating primary surgery and giving adjuvant chemotherapy, they used to go back again and relook. Relaparotomy was done to see whether there is any other residual disease. So, but now it is shown that there's no benefit of doing a re-laparotomy for these relook laparotomies for already treated patients. So there's no benefit of doing this. So now this concept has gone. Previously it was there, now it's not there.
Ms. Geeta ma'am is asking again, precautions to be taken to prevent ovarian cancer in ART procedures.
Pardon? Precautions?
To be taken to prevent ovarian cancer in ART procedure.
Yeah, that I think now what we are seeing frequently nowadays is that more and more females who are undergoing infertility treatments, who are undergoing IVFs, they are having abnormal endometrium and an ovarian mass. So there are quite a bit compared to what we used to see 10 years back. Now these cases have increased. So I don't know whether the stimulation, ovarian stimulation is having some effect on the malignancy part, or the high progesterone they give. I'm not sure, but there are, I have not looked into detail into that, but now we are seeing that patients who are infertile and taking treatment for infertility, undergoing IVF, chances having ovarian and endometrial cancer is high in them. So precautions as such, I think they should not go overboard. So if there are multiple IVF failures, I think they should stop at one. They should draw a line and stop there. And unnecessary, even when they know it's a negative IVF, but still, if they go ahead, that will be, I think, wrong on our part. I think there we have to draw a line.
Ma'am, one last question by Dr. Ravi Kumar. Role of immunotherapy in ovarian cancer.
Immunotherapy is still not yet standardized. So there are clearly now for primary treatment, no, there is no role of immunotherapy. So now primary treatment will be, if it's an early stage, complete staging, and according to the stage, then you give adjuvant chemotherapy. And sometimes to improve the thing, we give bevacizumab, that is VEGF factor. So that can be given. So that also additional this one anti-angiogenesis. But immunotherapy as standard primary treatment is not still accepted.
One last question, ma'am. We got it. Dr. Ramesh Raheja is asking again. Suppose we have a CPA 125 positive patient. How do we differentiate from COX?
See, COX is very kind of it mimics ovarian malignancies, highly mimicking ovarian malignancy. So the presentation of the patient, the clinical examination, and even the CA 125 levels, everything will be very similar in COX and in epithelial ovarian malignancy. So patient is cachexic, patient is having loss of appetite, patient is having loss of weight, patient is having ascites, peritoneal nodules, omental caking, ovarian masses. So all this are similar. So only thing here, what we'll have to think is, one is history-wise, if any history of, especially if she's having infertility, endometrial tuberculosis could be there, or if she's having any exposure to tuberculosis, especially young ladies, COX will think that keep that in mind. And only thing which even PCR, when we do, sometimes it is false negative. So patients who are PCR comes as negative, we have taken up later for biopsy, it has turned out to be COX. So it is not 100% PCR also. So the one gold diagnostic here test can be done is a diagnostic laparoscopy. Put a scope and take a omental biopsy or peritoneal nodule biopsy and send for your histological examination.
We are continuously getting more questions, ma'am. Dr. Tanuja from Hubli, she's asking endometrioma with 5 centimeter. Can we try medical
Yeah.
therapy? Patient is having severe dysmenorrhea and she's just married.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, definitely. She's an ideal candidate to start with medical therapy. So, up to 4 to 6 months, you can try. But as you know, endometriosis surgery is the best option. And when you treat it, when it is at a lower grade, it is definitely treatment is better. But I mean, you'll have to counsel the patient to take her into account, and then just try for 1 or 2 months, up to 3 months, you can try for medical management. But if it is increasing, then definitely you'll have to go for surgical management.
One last question, ma'am. A role of PET scan after chemotherapy to detect recurrence, like it can it act like a second look laparoscopy?
No, there's no role of PET CT scan after treating the patient, because once you have treated, and the CA-125 definitely it has a prognostic value, and on follow-up you can just do a clinical examination, and just a routine ultrasound is enough along with CA-125. But if the patient is PET CT is only indicated when you have a good disease-free interval, that is at least a minimum of 6 to 12 months of disease-free is there. And I mean, ideally more than 12 months if she's not having any disease. And there is increased level of CA-125. And you were thinking of doing a secondary cytoreduction, which might help her. So that is only after DFI of 12 months. Planning for secondary cytoreduction, you want to detect a small deposit somewhere because of elevated CA-125, then PET CT is indicated. Otherwise, usually asymptomatic patients, we don't do any other extensive imaging modality except for examination and a routine ultrasound annually. CA-125 once in 6 months.
Thank you, Shobha ma'am. Thanks a lot for
Yeah.
taking this marathon Q&A questions.
Okay.
And thank you for answering everything. Any concluding remarks, ma'am, from your side?
Conclusion, yeah. I mean, see, this adnexal ovarian masses are very commonly dealt by our gynecologists, and as I said, they should elaborate to the patient about the risk of malignancy. So I think see, many of us don't want to discuss this with the patients because of putting fear into their mind. I think that thing should be little kind of more. We should be lenient towards making them aware of chances of malignancy even in younger patients nowadays. So we are seeing epithelial tumors even in 40-45-year-old females, unlike when we used to see after the menopause, after 50-55 years. So that should be always there. So any ovarian mass, first thing is we have to rule out malignancy. So then only your other management comes into play. So do not hesitate to do certain tests, to counsel the patient. It is for the betterment of the patient. So that should be kept in mind.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
whatever imaging and biochemical tests are there, make use of it.
Very informative and enriching session for us, ma'am. Thanks a lot once again for sharing your
Thank
valuable
you all for joining in.
knowledge with
Yeah.
us. It was indeed a
Yeah.
pleasure having you here today, and we hope that we meet again next time on some another important topic.
Yeah.
Thank
Sure.
you to all the viewers as well for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you all.
till the
Okay.
next time we meet, on behalf of complete team of RPGLS, goodbye, stay safe, and thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.